There's a weed in West Texas that can survive chemicals designed to kill everything. And it learned how to do it. From the farmers themselves. In 1998, if you stood in a cotton field outside Lubbock, Texas, you would have seen something farmers called a miracle. Clean fields. No weeds. No competition. No struggle. Just rows of perfect green, stretching all the way to the horizon. Not because farmers were working harder, but because they had stopped working. They only needed one thing: glyphosate, Roundup, a system so simple, it felt impossible to fail. Plant crops engineered to survive the spray. Apply the chemical across the entire field. Everything else dies. Every weed. Every unwanted plant. Every green thing competing for water, sunlight, nutrients. Gone in 48 hours. No hoeing. No cultivating. No walking rows under a 100-degree sun. Just spray and walk away. The cost dropped overnight. A 1,000-acre farm could save tens of thousands of dollars every season. Less labor. Less fuel. Less time. More profit. More control. And like anything that works too well, no one asked questions. Within 5 years, everyone switched. Fields became straighter. Machines became faster. Farming became easier. Cleaner. People stopped talking about weeds. Because weeds were gone. Except for one farmer. His name was Raymond Hale. He farmed 640 acres on the west side of Lubbock. Land his family had worked for generations. Flat. Rich. Endless. The kind of land that could grow anything. And grow it well. And the kind of land where doing what everyone else was doing made the most sense. But Raymond didn't switch. He didn't plant Roundup-ready crops. He didn't spray glyphosate. He kept doing something the rest of the county had abandoned. He cultivated. An old tractor. A 6-row cultivator. Steel in the soil. 3 passes every season. Slow. Precise. Close enough to kill the weeds, but not the crop. While his neighbors finished in 2 days, Raymond took 12. While others sat inside air-conditioned cabs, he sat in dust, heat, and noise. At the co-op, they had a name for him. A man from another time. He's farming like it's 1950. A dealer named Derek Shaw did the math for everyone. You're wasting over $50,000 a year, just to avoid chemicals. Raymond didn't argue. He just said one thing. Your weeds die every year, until they don't. No one understood what he meant. Not in 1998. Not in 2002. Because everything still worked. Perfectly. The weeds still died. The fields were still clean. The money was still coming in. No one imagined that somewhere beneath the surface, a few plants were surviving. And those survivors were learning. Learning how to endure. Learning how to adapt. Learning how to turn poison into nothing. Every spray wasn't just killing weeds. It was selecting them. Killing the weak. Leaving the strong. And letting the strong produce hundreds of thousands of seeds. Raymond knew this. Not from books. Not from school. From his father. And he was willing to spend 20 years waiting for the rest of the world to find out. Because the problem wasn't that the chemical didn't work. It was that it worked. For too long. Long enough to teach the weed how to survive it. By the early 2000s, the system looked unstoppable. Roundup wasn't just a product anymore. It was the system. Cotton, soybeans, corn. All built around one idea. Spray once, and everything disappears. In Lubbock County, almost every acre followed the same pattern. Same seed, same chemical, same timing. Year after year, fields looked identical. Clean, uniform, controlled, predictable. And predictability is what farmers trust most. At the co-op, nobody talked about weeds anymore. They talked about yield, about price, about equipment, about expansion. Because weeds were no longer a problem. Except for Raymond. Raymond's fields didn't look like everyone else's. The rows weren't as clean. The soil between them turned and loose, disturbed, because he was still running steel through it. 3 times a season, every year. The difference wasn't subtle. You could see it from the road. And people did. They always did. At the coffee shop, Raymond became a story. Still out there with that cultivator. 12 days of work for something we finish in 2. Burning diesel, just to prove a point. Derek Shaw repeated his numbers often. Loud enough for others to hear. $45 an acre in fuel and labor. Plus yield loss from root damage. He tapped the counter. You're paying more to get less. Heads nodded. Because the math made sense. Efficiency always does. And Raymond never argued the math. Because the math was right. For that year. For that system. For that moment. One afternoon, Derek drove out to Raymond's farm. Not to argue. To prove a point. He found Raymond at the edge of a cotton field. Engine idling. Dust settling behind him. You're still doing this? Derek asked. Raymond looked over. Still works. Derek shook his head. It works. Slower. He stepped into the row. Kicked at the soil. You could finish this entire field in a day with a sprayer. Raymond didn't answer. Derek continued. You're fighting time, fuel, and efficiency. You're losing money every season. Silence. Then Raymond shut off the engine. The field went quiet. You're right, he said. Derek paused. Didn't expect that. You're faster. You're cheaper. Raymond looked out across the field. Right now. Derek frowned slightly. What does that mean? Raymond took a step into the row. Bent down. And down. Pulled a small weed from the soil. Held it up between his fingers. This dies when you spray. He dropped it. Until one doesn't. Derek crossed his arms. That's not how it works. Raymond nodded once. That's exactly how it works. Derek didn't respond. Because there was nothing in his numbers that accounted for that. They stood there for a moment. 2 different systems. 2 different beliefs. One built on chemistry. One built on steel. Derek finally turned back toward his truck. If that day ever comes, he said, we'll have something better. Raymond didn't answer. He didn't need to. Because he had heard that sentence before. From a different man. In a different decade. And he knew how it ended. He climbed back onto the tractor. Started the engine. The cultivator dropped into the soil. Steel cutting through dirt. Row by row. Pass by pass. Doing the same thing it had always done. Killing everything it touched. And leaving nothing behind. To learn how to survive. Raymond didn't come up with the idea on his own. He inherited it. From a man who had already watched the same story play out once before. His father, Thomas Hale. Back in the 1960s, before Roundup, before genetic seed, there was another chemical. and it was just as certain. Farmers called it the future. Spray it once, and the weeds disappeared. No cultivation, no labor, no guesswork, just results. Thomas used it, every year, same field, same rate, same timing. And for nearly a decade, it worked perfectly. Clean rows, healthy crops, higher yields, everything the salesman promised, delivered. Then one season, something changed. At first, it was small, a few weeds, still standing. Thomas noticed them while walking the rows. Bent down, looked closer, confused. He had sprayed correctly, the weather was right, the timing was right. But the weeds were still there. The next year, there were more, not everywhere, but enough to notice. By the third year, patches formed, areas where the chemical did nothing. The same product, the same application, the same field, different result. Thomas didn't understand it at first, so he did what farmers always do. He changed chemicals. A new product, stronger, more expensive. And it worked, for a while. Then the weeds came back again, stronger, more stubborn, harder to kill. Over the next 15 years, Thomas cycled through everything, different herbicides, different mixtures, different strategies. Each one worked, until it didn't. Until one afternoon, he stopped trying. Raymond was young then, standing at the edge of the field, watching his father. "What changed?" he asked. Thomas didn't answer right away. He reached down, pulled a weed from the soil, held it up. "The ones that survive," he said slowly, "are the ones that matter." Raymond frowned, didn't understand. Thomas continued, "Every time you spray, you're not just killing weeds. You're choosing them. Killing the weak ones, and letting the strong ones reproduce." He dropped the weed, ground it into the dirt with his boot. Do that long enough, and all you've got left are the ones you can't kill. That was the year Thomas parked the sprayer, and brought the cultivator back out. Steel instead of chemical, slow instead of fast, certain instead of convenient. Raymond learned everything sitting on that tractor. How deep to run the sweeps, how close to the row, how to read the soil, how to feel, through the steering wheel, when the cultivator was cutting right. It wasn't written down, it wasn't taught in school, it was learned. Pass by pass, season by season. And more importantly, it didn't change, because the method didn't rely on biology, it relied on physics. A steel edge, 2 inches below the soil. Cut the root, the plant dies. No mutation, no adaptation, no resistance, just cause and effect. Years later, when Roundup came along, Raymond saw the same pattern. Different chemical, same promise, kill everything, forever. And he remembered, standing in that field with his father, watching the weeds come back, one at a time. So when everyone else switched, he didn't. Not because he thought he was smarter, but because he had already seen the ending, and he knew exactly how long it would take. Not 1 year, not 5, but long enough for everyone else to forget the lesson, and start teaching the weeds, all over again. The change didn't happen all at once. It never does. At first, it was just a rumor. A farmer in the next county saying the spray didn't work, not like it used to. Then another. Then a field where the weeds stayed green, after everything else had died. Most people ignored it, they always do. Because systems don't fail suddenly. They fail slowly. Until they don't. By 2005, the whispers had a name: resistance. Weeds that no longer died. Not weaker, not damaged, alive, growing, competing. As if the spray had never touched them. At first, farmers doubled the rate. Then they sprayed twice. Then they added another chemical. Then another. Each step, more expensive, more complicated, less certain. The system that once needed one pass, now needed 3, sometimes 4. And still, the weeds came back. By 2008, it wasn't a rumor anymore. It was everywhere. Fields that had been clean for a decade were now full of something new. Red root amaranth. Taller, thicker, faster. It didn't grow like a weed. It grew like a problem. 3 feet, 4, 6. Some plants thick enough to stop a combine. And worse, they produced seed. Hundreds of thousands per plant. Each one carrying the same lesson. How to survive. The cost hit next. $15 an acre. Became 80. Then 100. Some farms pushed past $140 just to keep the fields manageable. And even then, they weren't clean. Hand crews came back, walking rows, pulling weeds, a practice no one had seen since their grandfather's time. $30 an acre, 50. Paid in heat, paid in labor, paid in desperation. At the co-op, the conversations changed. No more talk about efficiency. No more talk about saving time. Only cost and loss. Derek stopped quoting his old numbers. They didn't make sense anymore. Because the system they were built on was breaking. One morning, he drove past a field he knew well. A field that had been sprayed perfectly. And still, it was covered. Weeds standing between the rows, taller than the crop, stealing everything. Water, light, yield. He didn't stop. He kept driving. Because he already knew where he was going. Raymond's farm. He pulled up at the edge of a cotton field, got out, walked into the rows, and stopped. The field was clean. Not sprayed clean, cultivated clean. The soil loose, dark, turned. No tall weeds, no survivors. Just crop. And the marks of steel, cutting through the ground. Raymond was at the far end, turning the tractor, coming back down the row. Derek watched the cultivator move, watched the sweeps cut through the soil, watched the small weeds disappear, instantly. No delay, no resistance, just gone. When Raymond reached him, he shut off the engine. The field went quiet. Derek didn't speak right away. He looked out across the rows, then back at Raymond. They won't die. Raymond nodded. I know. Derek shook his head slowly. We've sprayed everything. Mixed everything. Nothing works. Raymond stepped down from the tractor, walked into the row, pressed his boot into the soil. Still works, he said. Derek looked at the ground, at the clean rows, at the absence of weeds. And for the first time, the numbers didn't matter. Because there was something the numbers never measured. What happens when the system stops working? And standing there, in a field that didn't fail, Derek realized something. The problem wasn't the weed. The problem was, they had taught it how to survive. The calls started quietly. At first, Just one. Then another. Then enough that Raymond stopped answering the phone during the day. Farmers, neighbors, men who hadn't spoken to him in years, asking the same question. How do you run that cultivator? Not why. Not anymore. That part had already been answered. By the fields, by the weeds that wouldn't die. By the money that kept disappearing, and by the one farm that hadn't changed. In the spring of 2010, a university truck pulled into Raymond's driveway. Dr. Alan Mercer, wheat scientist. He had spent 5 years studying resistance, writing papers, giving talks, warning farmers. But warnings don't change behavior. Failure does. And now, failure was everywhere. I need a field, Mercer said. Raymond looked at him, didn't ask why. I need a place to show them, Mercer continued. A real field. Not Fury. Raymond nodded once. Use mine. The first field day was in June. 40 farmers showed up. They stood at the edge of a soybean field. Same soil, same weather, same weeds. Different result. Raymond drove the tractor forward, for miles per hour, steel cutting through the soil. The line was clear. Ahead of the cultivator, weeds, behind it, nothing. No chemical, no resistance. No delay, just gone. The farmers didn't talk, because they understood. They were looking at something they had thrown away, and now needed back. Where do we get one? Someone asked. Raymond didn't look up. You don't. They stopped making them. Silence. You all had them, he continued. You sold them. You scrapped them. Because you thought you wouldn't need them again. That was the moment it landed. Not the science, not the economics, the mistake, they hadn't just adopted something new. They had abandoned something permanent. And when the new thing failed, the old thing was gone. Derek came later that year. Not as a salesman, not with numbers, with questions. I need to learn this, he said. Raymond studied him for a moment. You told them to throw these away. Derek nodded, I know. They listened to me. Another pause. Longer this time. This time. And I was wrong. Raymond turned, walked toward the cultivator. Come here, he said. That was how it started. Not with a lecture, not with a manual, with a pass through the field. Raymond showed him how to set the sweeps, how deep to run, how close to the row. Derek made mistakes. Cut too deep, too shallow, too fast. Raymond corrected him, quietly, like that. Feel the difference. It took weeks before Derek could run a clean pass. Months before he trusted himself. Years before he understood what Raymond had known all along. This wasn't equipment. It was skill. And skill couldn't be bought, only learned. By 2015, the numbers told the rest of the story. Raymond's weed control cost, $45 an acre. The county average, $142. His yields, higher. His fields, cleaner. Not because his soil was better, because his method didn't fail. The others kept adapting. New chemicals, new mixtures, new costs, trying to solve a problem that kept getting stronger. Raymond didn't adapt. He didn't need to, because the tool he used couldn't be beaten. A steel edge, 2 inches below the soil. Cut the root, the plant dies. No evolution, no resistance. Just physics. Raymond is 80 now. His son runs the tractor most days. Same machine, same method. Different world. At the co-op, no one laughs anymore. Because the story isn't funny. It's expensive. Hundreds of millions of dollars lost every year to a weed that learned. Learned from repetition. Learned from certainty. Learned from a system that worked too well. Raymond never tried to outsmart the weed. He never tried to improve it. He just refused to teach it. My father told me, he says sometimes, every time you spray, you're choosing. Kill the weak, leave the strong. Do it long enough, and all you've got left are the ones that can't be killed. He pauses there, then adds one more thing. Steel doesn't choose. It kills everything the same. And that is why it still works.